Hello viewers, the second round of the GT7 Nations Cup gave us something rather special. A race which properly utilised the changing weather in the game, starting off with an incredibly wet race in very difficult conditions. The track would eventually dry up, forming a very dry line, where if you drove off of it, you would have no grip at all. This proved to be a treacherous combination where so many of us were crashing. In the first round of the championship, I got 281 points, and I'm trying to build upon that to get a good championship score. And so when I qualified in 4th place for my first attempt, I felt like I was well placed to get a good result. Now, this is a 28 lap race around the Red Bull Ring in Group 3 cars. As we go to turn 1, there is going to be a bit of contact here with the other Ferrari, but fortunately enough we both continue and he stays in front. But up into turn 3, this was often a pinch point in the race. I very nearly spun the car, which is very easy to do in these conditions, but we actually managed to continue and live to fight another day. On lap 2, it was all about just finding that grip, going deep, getting the rotation, and then getting on the power slightly earlier to get good traction and a good exit. Now, with a 28 lap race with changing weather, the sun would eventually come out, and as you can see, it would dry the track out, and so the levels of grip were very much changing. As we head on to lap 17, it was still wet in a lot of places, but that dry line was certainly beginning to form. Still on the wet tyre, it was eventually time to come in, because as you can see, the dry line had pretty much fully formed. So we peel into the pit lane, slowly to the right hand side, to get the slick tyre, the soft tyre for this second phase of this race. There we go. Now this is always a tricky moment, leaving the pit lane on cold, slick tyres over the wet tarmac back to the dry line. And this is where this race gets super difficult. You have to pretty much stick within this narrow line on the track, otherwise your grip levels fall to 0 and any hope of a good result go into the bin. So, having said that, trying to be careful with a bit of pressure behind, I actually take it a little bit too narrow here, going onto the curb, which doesn't have much grip at all. Now, fortunately enough, the guy behind also made the same mistake, but the guy behind that did not, and it was the Frenchman who I fought at the very beginning. And so I dropped from 3rd to 4th, but let's try not to make another mistake like that. Coming up into the hairpin at turn 3. Again, just got to be super careful here. Now this is where the race truly unravels, because if you take a look at the radar, you'll see that we are pretty much side by side. There's not really enough space for us to go side by side, given the narrow width of the dry line, and it's just one of these weird racing incidents. There's a tiny bit of contact, but I'm spinning around doing a 540 spin, ending up the wrong way, recovering eventually in 7th place, albeit after disappointingly dropping many positions there. And given the gaps were so big, I managed to have this nice little 360 moment. You can see just how spread out the race is. This one was truly a very big test for everyone's driver ability. As we head into turn 1 on the final lap, there was a car off on the left hand side, and so I managed to recuperate to 6th position by the end of the final lap, 46 minutes later. And I was actually 41 seconds away from the lead at the end, scoring 235 points. But for the second race, I thought, you know what, we know what to do now. We know what the conditions are going to be. We know how to drive it, theoretically. And I know what mistakes to avoid. So, jump into the qualifying session here. I've given myself a nice amount of space. Tried to set a good lap. Now, I started 4th on that first race. And so, we want to try to repeat that, if not a little bit better. You certainly want to be towards the front, because overtaking is actually quite tricky in the rain, and even more so in the latter stage of the race when the dry line begins to form. because you can't really go off the dry line. If you go off of it, there's no grip. So you can't really overtake unless the person in front makes a mistake. That's the only way. This was my initial qualifying lap. As you can see with the lines, it's very different than the dry line. You kind of have to almost drive off of the dry line as much as possible, at least on the outside tyres. So it was a case of just finding the grip, just trying to realise exactly where it was. And on my first attempt there, you see I got into second initially, albeit 1 second away from Costas in the lead. So there's definitely time to be found, because as a couple more people cross to finish their laps, you can see me tumbling down the order from second down to fifth, then down to sixth. Still with 1 second to find to gain a few more positions. Half a tenth up in the first sector, which is not enough really, but I would say the middle sector, especially in the wet, is where the time really is won and lost here. So heading down towards turn 4, heading narrow to try to get off that rubber dry line, braking, and then heading back to the outside to get a better turning in angle. Crossing across the dry line to come back for a slightly narrower exit. Bit of a twitch there on the exit. Luckily, I gave myself enough of a gap in this one, so I didn't really have to worry about traffic on this second lap. Again, driving wide as we head down the hill. Again, very wide to get that grip out wide beyond the dry line. Luckily, this GTR has a slow lap, but he pulls off to the right hand side, so I don't get slowed down there. 6 tenths up in sector 2. That's really nice. Let's see if we can gain a few more tenths through the final sector, dropping down towards the final corner. An awkward one, you have to get over that curb really early. Heading up towards the finish line, it is going to be an improvement, but where to? Let's take a look. As we cross the finish line, near enough 4 tenths off the leads. It was initially second, then Balestre set a better time. I dropped to third. But from here, I think we can have a good race. And, well, I can assure you that this one was a very good race. Starting third, so one better than before. Armed with all the knowledge from the mistakes I made in race 1, we set off once more for 28 laps off the Red Bull Ring. In initially, of course, these very wet conditions, which will eventually become drier at the end. So initially here, it's a case of just obviously trying to not make a stupid mistake, but just trying to stay in the race and ideally trying to overtake. However, I don't quite get the line on the way in, either on the way out, and get overtaken by DJ. Now, DJ and I had really close qualifying times. It was well under a tenth of a second between us, which is an even smaller gap when you consider that it was wet. And so I was expecting a close race between the two of us. Now, Balestre was in our race last week. He was also in race 1, and he was incredibly quick, albeit with a couple of mistakes. And so in a race like this, I was always expectant, or hoping you could say, that some of the drivers in front would be making mistakes. And it's very much one of those where, you know, if you can minimise your own mistakes, then there's a very good chance of finishing very highly. So into the final corner, or final 2 corners of the lap, right up behind DJ. He wasn't too confident on that penultimate corner, I did notice. But coming through here, he makes a bit of a mistake, just goes a little bit wide of the apex. And once you're wide of the apex, it's really hard to get back to it in these conditions. So I moved back to third, setting off what would be a really good battle between the two of us. Up behind Balestre here, with Costas just beginning to pull away up the front. Many of you may be wondering why there are so many of us using the Ferrari GT3 car. And I think it's mainly just due to the rotation of this car. When you get on the brakes and release, it just turns so nicely. Not normally in the dry, but in the wet, it just has that rotation. It just really does turn very well in these conditions. Now, of course, there are many other cars, but this seemed to be the go-to choice for the race. The Grande Macchina, as Sebastian Vettel would say. Now, Balestre took this line, on the exit of the middle chicane, no, middle sector, he was really confident across that curve, and it, you know, he kind of made that look really easy. I can assure you that, as I will experiment later in the race, it's not an easy line to take, and it just opens up a couple of car lengths by doing it. I make the mistake here on the exit of the final corner, end of lap 2, and it's kind of a repeat of what DJ did one lap prior, dropping therefore down back to 4th, and this is lap 4 now. You can probably tell that the top two were kind of in a league of their own. They were, at least I would say, half a second a lap quicker, if not more than that, maybe even a second. And, you know, gaps of that kind aren't unusual in these conditions, because if you can just get that rotation and traction dead right, you do gain a lot of time. So back up the inside of DJ here, into turn 3, lap 4, and back to P3. It was a really good battle between the two of us, and I was quite happy to get in front and try to pull away, although that would not be easy. See here, trying to take that curb line across that corner exit just does not work, or I could not make it work, let's say. Now DJ actually had a run there and probably could have gone up the inside, but that kind of showcases the difficulty of overtaking in these conditions. It's actually quite hard often to go up the inside, as you don't always have the grip once you get back onto the racing line, at least the dry racing line. So as we begin lap 7, DJ there just opting for the push towards turn 1, bit of bump drafting. He's actually going to make a bit of a mistake there, as you can see on the radar, just losing traction on the corner exit. I managed to open up the gap to 2 seconds, but only for a couple of laps. It therefore dawned on me that this guy, I think, was genuinely quicker, but I just had the track position. And therefore, I was playing this pretty well so far. You know, top 2 were in a league of their own. I wasn't really expecting to keep with them, but I was keeping this guy at bay, and it seemed like I think he was a bit quicker than me. He just needed to get past and consolidate the position. And again here, not opting to go up the inside, which would have been quite a risky move into turn 1 with the now drying line, as you can see, different colours of grey. Not quite 50 of them, but maybe 2. Braking here up towards turn 3, just trying to cover him off and go defensive, but he's going to perform a nice little switch back here, get that traction on the exit, and this is where things can become quite complicated. I do want to move over to the right to get the braking grip, but I'm going to have to take a bit more of an outside line here. The grip does eventually come to you on that outside line. Not quite going to be enough though, as he does draw alongside and eventually just get clear and retake that 3rd position. So this was a really good battle. I really did enjoy this. It was super difficult to keep the car on the road, let alone whilst fighting someone. And so lots of respect between the two of us, I think. And this is what, you know, Gran Turismo can be about. Some really close and intense battles, and this one was certainly very enjoyable. My main task now was really just to not let him get away. But look at this. He had a really nice rotation and line through that final corner. Really getting the back end round to get that rotation, get the angle so that you can get on the power just that bit earlier. And that was the key, I think, to the speed around this track. Unlocking that speed, just getting the car to turn nicely before you get on the power. This is the end of lap 21, opting therefore to come into the pit lane. The conditions were exactly the same as the first race, so we all know when to come into the pit lane and what the strategy is, which is of course to come in, end of lap 21, change onto the soft tyre, and then this is the dangerous bit, as I will showcase here, because this has cost us in seconds. He's just exited the pit lane with Beless and put 2 wheels just onto the wet line, and it just shows you that's all it takes, and he's immediately round. He tries to recover to the track, as you can see, and he spins again. So that 12, 13, 14 second gap he had has evaporated in the series of mistakes there. Now DJ is going to get a run. They're both going to fight. They're both going to squabble for this dry line. which we really need because we are on the slick tyres at this latter phase of the race. And I'm just behind, licking my lips, knowing that there's potential of more positions in this race. Now in race 1, this was the phase where I was actually a little bit off the pace. My pace wasn't quite there. Also, I was making mistakes. And so I was hoping that I could learn from that. Try to keep it a bit more tidy. No mistakes. And let's see if these other guys can be the ones to make those mistakes. So we're sat here in 4th. 3rd and 2nd immediately in front. Beless in the lead, still a comfortable 15 seconds up the road. But this is where the sequence of mistakes would come into the race, because Costas is about to make another mistake here. Really easy to do on this corner because it's quite hard to see with the glare from the sun exactly where the wet line is and exactly where the dry line is. And so he just dips again the 2 wheels on the outside into the wet zone. And before you know it, you're sailing wide. The slick tyres just have no grip when they're on wet surfaces. And so I am up into 3rd. And would you believe, 1 lap later at exactly the same corner, DJ there, who looks quite comfortable, is about to be uncomfortable by doing the same mistake. 2 wheels becomes 4 wheels, becomes 4 wheels on the gravel, and he's going to drop 2 positions now. So I find myself just behind, and as soon as that spray comes up, I know that he's in trouble. I then move up into 2nd place as a result, albeit with Costas right behind with a lot of pressure being applied. I did notice the gap to Beless in the lead has gone down to 11 seconds, so he has actually made a mistake. So we can't rule anything out at this point. These are just such interesting conditions that just do not come up all that often in this game, which I must say is a shame because I think it's pretty well simulated, not perfect, but it by and large is pretty fun, pretty interesting, and a bit different than what they normally give us. Up into turn 1, lap 25, 4 to go. Now I have the key benefit of track position. As long as I just stick to this line, it's going to be really difficult for any car behind to overtake. Now I'll get a notification there. Head down, Steve, it's hammer time. And unfortunately, that's going to set me off here because coming into turn 3, just a little bit too wide. Off the dry line, try to get some traction. There isn't any. And I've done a nice 360 back to 4th place. It was a faultless race until that point there. And, you know, 1 mistake, you lose. I lost there maybe 7 or 8 seconds in one go. And of course, 2 positions. So super frustrating. By lap 27, only 2 to go now. You can see the top, the 2 in front of me beginning to pull clear, you know, 3 seconds in front, 6 seconds in front. It's looking rather unlikely I'm going to be able to catch up on pace. However, Costas, he wasn't done making some errors here. And so coming into here, he had the track position. He was in 2nd. He could have taken it easy, as I could have done a few laps ago. But he's going to make 1 more mistake, drop back to 3rd. DJ goes back through. And setting up quite an interesting final lap here because there's 3 of us within, let's say, 3 seconds. And so I'm very much in prime position to pick up the pieces should anything go wrong. And something is about to go wrong for Costas once again. I think this man was cursed in these conditions because he goes wide onto the curb. There is no grip on such curbs. And before you know it, he is spun around, losing plenty of time. And it's so unfortunate for him because he was leading the majority of this race, doing a really good job in the wet conditions. But he has been well and truly tripped over here by the mixed conditions, dropping to 7th. So that was a massive disaster for him. Now we have a yellow flag here. I was hoping that might be the leader. And unfortunately it wasn't. It was a back marker. It was wide there on the outside. I actually felt pretty quick in these conditions. I had a lot more confidence in finding the grip. Now on board with the leader Beless, because he was driving faultlessly the entire race. Until this moment, on the final lap, he was 20 seconds in the lead. So he makes the first mistake there, loses maybe 10 seconds, something like that. And then he comes down here and he's about to drive wide again and lose maybe another 5 seconds, 5 or 6 here. And so I'm there thinking, you know, if I hadn't made my mistake, I probably or possibly could have won this race, because I'm now only 5 seconds off the lead, and I lost about 7 or 8 with my mistake. And so it's going to be one of those races where you're kind of thinking what could have been, but at the same time I think to drive to 3rd place is still a solid result. It's where I started the race. There are lots of things that could have gone wrong, and DJ was very quick, but Les was very quick, and so I can't complain too much with a good result and a solid score after all of that of 281 points. So the results are in, as you can see, 281 points again, which is exactly the same as the first round. And in the region of Europe, Middle East, Africa, I am 34th in the region, so which is a pretty good score so far. Hopefully next one we're going to try and get into the top 30. And as it stands, in the top 5% of all the different areas. So we're on for the 9 million credits. But please do join me on Wednesday for the 3rd round of the championship. I'll see you there. Goodbye.